Hello, my name is Tanya Snook. This is my final exam for Dr. Reyes, and mine is about Knowles and his adult learning theory, how it applies to teaching or to instructing with teachers, with doing professional development, with doing change in our schools, and then also how it does and doesn't apply to actually teaching in the classroom with K through 12 students. First, when we look at Knowles and his adult learning theory, there are 6 core assumptions that Malcolm Knowles makes for his theory. The first is a need to know. Adults, unlike children, they need to know why they're learning something. They need to know that there is a purpose to it, that it's not something that is just being told to us and then sits on the shelf. A lot of teachers, when we've sat through professional development, um, you hear the concept at the beginning of the year and then it's never spoken of again until the next new bright shiny idea comes through. When we see a why to something, why are we learning it, and we see that need, teachers are more likely to respond to the training or to the suggestions and actually implement them in their classrooms. Secondly, is self-concept. Adults see themselves as being responsible for their own decisions. They are responsible for their learning. They're self-directed. They're self-motivated. And so we need to tap into that and make sure that they understand that they are part of the journey as well. It's not them just being lectured to, it's actually their discussions, their thoughts. It's kind of that group learning, right? Where even the person leading the staff development takes something away when they leave as well because they've had that group discussion, that group think. We've shared ideas. It's much like how our class has been run throughout the semester. Thirdly, in Knowles acknowledges that when adults come to the table to learn, that they have prior experiences. They have prior life experiences, prior career experiences. And so we need to make sure that we honor that and that we listen to that. And we're not just saying, hey, this is what you're going to do. It works for all. Just because I said so. We let them have that buy-in, right? And that they share those experiences and that we then individualize things so that it fits what their need is. We also know that adults are ready to learn things that are relevant to their immediate tasks and role. It's that readiness to learn. If it is applicable to what they're doing, they're ready to learn it. If it will make their job easier, they're ready to learn it. If it brings them better student outcomes, they're ready to learn. And so they want to take part of it. Again, tying into that why. Why is it going to be helpful? Why will it do this? And then that gives them that internal drive, that readiness to learn. Also, adults have an orientation to learning. They're problem-centered rather than subject-centered in learning. They want to see how it fits in the big picture. They want to see how it solves a problem. They don't want to learn it in isolation. That just doesn't work. Um, and so we want to make sure that we're letting them see the bigger picture, how it all fits together, and why that happens. For most of my career, I was special ed or CTE teacher. And I used to have to go to meetings that I never understood why I was there. They would talk about things that I didn't do at my job, that were so different than what I was doing in my classroom, that I often just sat there and didn't take anything in. But when I had professional development in technical writing, and I remember the leader of the session saying, "This is how it would apply in a science classroom. This is how it would apply into the engineering classroom." I took something from that because now all of a sudden it's relevant to what I do. And we want to make sure that we value that and we make sure that we honor that with our teachers. Lastly, adults are primarily motivated by those internal factors. We're internally driven. We have that internal motivation. And so we want to make sure that we don't turn that off also, and that we are buying into that motivation that they have as well. When we look at successful leadership, whether that be a superintendent's role, a principal's role, a department head's role, in the education setting, and for my presentation, I'm looking at the K through 12 setting. We want to make sure we do 4 things when we are when we're being a leader. We want to communicate that why. That ties into that need to know with adults. We want to clearly articulate the purpose and the payout of any new initiative. And by payout, I mean, what will the results be if I do this? If I'm going to implement this new writing strategy, how will that give me a direct dividend in my classroom? It can't be just about test scores. It has to be about my students will become better at, in my case with engineering, that their journals will become better, more well written, more well documented. They will be a quality product that they can take forward. So we're communicating that why for that need to know piece of the learning theory. Um, Next, as a leader, we want to facilitate. We don't want to dictate. We want to be a coach. We want to walk alongside them and learn with them, right? That, again, it shifts you from that traditional teacher-student role or that principal-teacher role to really involving your teachers in the planning of things, tapping into those experiences, letting them lead where they can, and giving them that internal satisfaction of being a part of the plan. We want to leverage that expertise. We're tying into that prior knowledge that Knowles talks about, and really valuing what all of our teachers bring to the table, especially in today's education environment. We have more and more educators in the building that are their first careers aren't teachers. As a CTE administrator, as a CTE instructor, uh, you have a lot of people coming from industry. They're ready to give back. They've had their successful career. They're ready to give back, or they want that calendar time where they can have the summers off with their kids, so they go back into the classroom so that they can share their love and their passion for with their students who are also passionate about something. We want to leverage that expertise and then coach them up. We want to help them get those teaching strategies to go along with the content knowledge um, and then be successful in their classrooms. And then we want to make sure that Knowles talks about being problem centered. We want to focus on that application. We want to present that new activity as a direct solution to a real classroom challenge. Um, and so we want to make sure that the teachers see the relevance in it, the reason behind it, why that's going to benefit them, that payoff again, and how that's going to directly help them as they move forward. Now we move to implementing change, seeing how we as a principal, a superintendent, can bring that change to the building or the district. First, we are again looking at readiness and need. You're wanting to really look at the problem, the readiness to learn. Is there an immediate need to learn this information, and how we can implement that in our schools? Adults have to see. They have to Adults need to see the direct immediate relevance to solving their current problems. And so when we think about that, we want to frame our new teacher activity as a solution to a recognized challenge. Think about skill gaps, think about student disengagement, and that this then appeals to that teacher's readiness to learn. We also want to look at that continuous learning through self-direction and motivation, that training and experience. Continuous learning is supported by giving teachers the autonomy over how they integrate and adapt that new activity of self-direction, and fostering that internal motivation for professional growth. And lastly, we want to make sure that we have given that organization that adult buy-in, which is achieved by respecting their existing knowledge and involving them in those processes to implement the change. So leaders have to actively solicit input from teachers about the current classroom experience, adapt that training based on their expertise, reduce resistance, and increase the likelihood of successful organizational change. We want to do those ongoing check-ins to support that continuous learning, those that internal motivation piece, and make sure that we are really being that facilitator, that coach that checks in with them, that makes sure that they're learning what they need to learn. We're acting as a guide on the side, right? Not the sage on the stage. We're providing resources and support while empowering our teachers to troubleshoot, to adapt the new activity to themselves, which is essential for that sustained continuous learning. And we personalize it, right? It's something that what works for the English teacher may not work for the history teacher, may not work for the math teacher, not work for the special ed teacher. How are we going to personalize the changes that we're trying to bring in and make sure that they are part of it and that it actually works in their classrooms as well? Let's then look at Knowles and how it applies for a teacher into the classroom, because there are some pieces of Knowles that actually work with kids, and then there's some that don't work quite so well. And so when we look at first at what works, um, things that work is that they still need to know as well. They want to know. Um, they need to know they have that engagement when the learning is relevant to their immediate lives. It's got to be concrete, though. It can't be um, abstract for them. It has to be something immediate, not long term. They just don't have that. Um, they just can't see that far in the future. It has to be something pretty immediate for them. And it's that hook, right? It's that thing that gets them excited to learn. So we want to make sure that they see that. We also want to, when looking at the orientation to learning, problem-centered versus subject learning, think about project or problem-based learning. We make we use that in classrooms, and we've seen the effects of it. When I was at Waxahachie Global High School, which was a STEM early college high school, our entire curriculum was project and problem-based learning. Uh, People wondered what would happen when kids took the STAR test. Would they pass? Because that's paper pencil, it's all multiple choice, and that's not something we ever did or practiced. Our kids routinely aced it. The school has been a U.S. News and World Report best schools since 2013. They are still A-rated by TEA. It does work. Kids can make that leap, and they can see how those skills we're teaching work in the bigger thing. When I taught government, dual credit government, instead of teaching each little subset of what is a democracy, I had a project where kids were taking over a new country that had just overthrown their dictator, and they wanted a democracy. And they had to put the things in place to make that country be a democracy. The kids loved it. They learned so much, and they learned about all the different models of democracy that are out there. And then readiness to learn. This is really tied to their developmental tasks, their age-appropriate social roles. Learning's timely and relevant to their current life stage, but it's a little bit more defined by the educational system, whereas readiness to learn is more internally defined by adults. And then some things aren't quite as applicable for students, for the K through 12 students. Self-concept, when you're looking at that shift from dependency to self-direction, children are still developing the cognitive executive function skills that are necessary for full self-direction and autonomy. They still require structure. They still require that teacher guide. They still require curriculum assessment and time management that adults don't necessarily need. So it's there, it's just not quite as applicable to students. On prior experiences, children have a much more limited reservoir of life experiences compared to adults. They don't have career experience. They don't have 40 years of life under their belt. They don't have mistakes they've made raising their children. While their experience is relevant, it's not the primary resource for new learning. Because their core knowledge is still being built. Now, if you can tap into something that is kind of their passion or their love, you can definitely tie into that prior experience with that. It just looks different than it does for an adult. And then motivation. Intrinsic motivation is what we all want with kids, but we know that they still rely on those extrinsic motivators like grades, approval from their teachers, approval from parents, your progression to the next grade level, that you're not getting retained, that you don't have to go to summer school. Those extrinsic things are still driving kids, whereas it's not as important to an adult. So we want to make sure that we just don't factor in so much on that motivation piece that we would. These are my references. I use the two readings from our class. And so thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you have a good night.